we want to take a minute to thank our newest sponsor on the show, 482 Designs. That is FOUR, the numbers 82 Designs, 482 Designs. You can find them on Facebook by looking up FOUR 82 Designs, at FOUR 82 Designs on Instagram. And if you want to email them, go to FOUR82designs@gmail.com. Pretty soon, we're going to be rolling out some high-quality t-shirts and stickers that were just done by the sponsor. Please check them out for any of your screen printing needs.
First off, it's light years better than our first run. Also, like, survive the washer and dryer. They look good, and they're good quality.
Nice. And those stickers before Paco chewed them up were amazing. And luckily, we'll be getting some more in, hopefully, before we start selling them to fans. But that's FOUR 82 Designs.
Working Fans Podcast. Cool.
Yep.
All right, here we go. Coming down 3, 2.
Welcome back for another week of the Working Fans Podcast. This is AJ. I'm the former wrestler. We've got Dave, the ultimate fan, here with us. As we do every week, our producer Joe likes to make us sound good and makes us look way more professional than we actually are. As always, you can find us on Twitter, that's @FansWorking, Facebook, Working Fans Pod. We've got email where you can reach out to us and please contact us to let us know what you think of the podcast and for any ideas that you might have. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. We're on Instagram where you can keep up with us at workingfanswrestling_pod. And then you can now listen to us on all major platforms, including Anchor.fm. We're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Apple Podcasts, and you can actually check us out on YouTube. Now, it's important when you go onto the Apple Podcasts and YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a rating, let us know what you think so you can help us out and we can continue to do what we love and bring you guys in as fans.
Dave, this weekend we had the joy of watching some of All Out for me, and you were able to watch the whole show.
Yeah.
Before we kind of go through it, like, what are your impressions of the pay-per-view as a whole?
It was their worst effort. I didn't think it was their best effort in terms of pay-per-views and big shows. Pacing was really off. The pacing really dragged. I thought part of that was maybe because I was tired because it was Labor Day weekend. I worked a lot.
Yeah.
But then I got kind of the same response from other people. Mike Flynn had messaged me, and he said this card is just dragging. He said a lot of these matches that I would like don't seem to be clicking. There was some weird booking decisions. There's some good from this show too. There are some good things that I liked that maybe other people wouldn't. I almost feel weird about the things I actually really like, but I'll mention that as we go on the show. But for the most part, hey, and I'm not shitting on the company. I still love AEW. Dynamite's still great. Just wasn't a solid effort. It didn't happen to work out.
Yeah, this is weird. This is almost like, in the whole time that I've been watching AEW, the only thing that I'd be like, ooh, wow, that was not great. I mean, some of like the early Dark Order stuff, like where they got exposed with the hits, wasn't a good look for the company, but I could get over it. This, I mean, there's obviously a couple things that really touched people the wrong way. And like you said, it was just odd pacing. Shit that was going to be on the pre-show got moved to the regular show. Where things were placed on the show, I thought was weird.
Yeah, and I'll touch up on a few other things, too. Some of this could have been the heat, and Dynamite was taped once in a while. They were going back and forth. And when you can do that, you have the ability to crowd scooting a little bit. That wasn't able to happen with a lot of this show. So Daily Place isn't always the best for sound. It's an open arena. And then the people are really hot. And they were probably, and so it's just hard to say. I mean, this actually, if you go back, one of the people we had fans, whatever event they had at Daily Place, it was a good look. Remember, there were people tired that night, too, and they were complaining about the heat. So there's something that happens once in a while at this place.
Yeah, I know for me, especially with work, like, Labor Day weekend kicked my ass. I went to a party after work and then right to the pay-per-view. So I caught pretty much all of the undercard. Everything up in the last match I saw was Hikaru Shita versus Thunder Rosa. But let's kind of go through the card and break it down a little bit.
One other thing, too. How bizarre is it? Like, WWE just had, like, a decent SummerSlam. Payback was better than expected because there was low expectations going into that. But they came off, like, a touted SmackDown this weekend. How weird is it that we have like good WWE feedback and then we're talking about negative AEW feedback? It almost feels bizarre.
It's definitely backwards, but we'll start talking about the show, and there'll be a couple obvious reasons why this thing went south. Now, Private Party versus Silver and Reynolds on the pre-show. It was a perfectly fine pre-show match, but it was something I could see kicking off the pay-per-view. Maybe it was a good tag match.
Would have been a better idea. Actually, originally the tooth and nail match was going to be on the pre-show. Tony had mentioned that there was some negative feedback. People thought that should have been on the main card. So we ended up getting 2 additional matches. One we didn't mention, Joey Janela had one again.
Sarah Pentico,
thank you. And then we had this match, which I thought it would have been a great match to kick off. You're right. And another thing, too, I want to add, I'm happy the guys got jobs. I know they're not on the bigger side, but damn it all, I really personally feel like Alex Reynolds, and especially John Silver, could do more. Especially in this match, you could see Silver had his working boots on and was busting his ass to get this match over with everything he did and every bump he took. So this was actually a big positive. I really I enjoyed this match a lot, actually.
Yeah, former guest of the show, John Silver. And if you can see what him and Reynolds did as the Beaver Boys and Beyond Wrestling, it's almost hard to see them as AEW top jobbers almost. I hate to say it, but...
No,
I'm still a huge fan of them, and they get their comedy over on Being the Elite, I hear.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, John Silver plays off great with Rowdy Lee and everybody. Silver's definitely coming off like the star, but Reynolds is great too. As a team, they're great. And on the Indies, I'll say this, Reynolds was a great heel. Like, people hated that motherfucker when he came out. So, and that's what you wanted to hear, right? So I would say, again, good job in this match. This will be a positive thing. I was very impressed with these guys. If anything, if you want to talk a negative, like you said, this could have opened the card. But that's not you know what I mean? Like, that's a compliment to these guys. They did great.
Sarah Pentico and Janela, I'd say nothing necessarily stood out about this match. It was a fine enough pre-show match. Yeah. Could have been a good dark match, but to me, it really wasn't much of, I really wouldn't say much of that. Nothing that stood out, at least.
Nothing bad, nothing good. It was just kind of there. It was what it was. It was a good pre-show match. It was fine for what it was.
To kick off the show, the cinematic match, Britt Baker versus Big Swole, I really have no problems with this opening the show. I thought it was a good enough cinematic match. It had its comedy. It played off one of the bigger storylines they've had going for a while.
It was hokey, however. A lot of these cinematic matches sometimes can be a little hokey. I didn't hate it as much as some other people did, but I didn't love it either. I'm not a huge fan of Swole. Nothing against her. I just, I'm not. I think Britt Baker is very charismatic. I love her heel work. Reba plays her silly little part good. That being said, I'm not, but Big Swole has charisma. People do get into it, but there's not really. It's funny, they could sweeten the crowd a little bit in this one, you can tell. But I don't know, it just didn't really click overall for me. I would say it's small negative because I didn't really enjoy the match, but it wasn't going to, it didn't sour me on the pay-per-view or anything at this point. It was just, to me it was just kind of like you said, I would have found the tag match kick this off, and this has been on the TV.
Yep, and something this pay-per-view seemed to do is give you a good match, then give you maybe a downer or a little bit of a break, and then the match after that was good. And the Bucks versus the Jurassic Express was next, and it's really kind of hard for that to be a bad match.
Yeah, no, they did great. They had their working shoes on. The Bucks looked fantastic. I thought they helped get Jungle Boy over, who was kicking out a lot of super kicks and stuff. He looked strong. Bucks showing a little bit of edge still, like they're mad over everything that's going on with Hangman. Yeah, no, I thought solid, good tag match. And again, this could have been a hell of an opener too. So this was definitely another thumbs up here.
True. And now the next match, which I would have expected to be the opener for the show, but it was third in, is the Casino Battle Royale. And we're not going to break down wave by wave who came in.
No.
Some of the most notable things are Matt Sydal making his debut and then almost breaking his neck. That was the first of a couple horrific falls in a row on this show.
One positive thing, actually, I will say this, and then we're going to talk about another bump in this battle royal. But positive thing, Will Hobbs. Happy to see this guy get kind of a push. He performed great in here. He had a presence, and it looks like this guy might have came from wrestling on Dark and maybe getting involved on Dynamite and being teased a little more. So happy for him.
Yeah, he was big in APW out in California, and it's good to see him get featured in this battle royal in a more prominent way.
Yeah, and there was one other thing. Oh, yeah. So one other thing I want to talk about, too, is the Darby Allin bomb. Putting him in the body bag, throwing up the thumbtack.
kind of filling it up with thumbtacks.
Yeah, correct.
Everybody
That's
was
the real
eating
thing.
that shit for the rest of the match.
Yeah, now I understand he's done this before, but boy, that's a tough bump, man. I mean, you can't see where you're landing, and I thought Cage is a pro, but I thought and the execution wasn't the best. I didn't enjoy that. I'm glad Harvey's okay, but
no, this is the most amount of sloppiness I've noticed in like a whole event for them. They've had their moments where sloppy things have come out, but like between the mat side out bump, then this body bag thumbtack spot, and I mean I'm not a wrestler, so I'm not criticizing them for that, but it's just these little things throughout the show that I was like, all right, I'm tired and this shit's going on. Like, what's gonna happen next? And we come to Matt Hardy versus Sammy Guevara, and holy shit.
I will say this. Archer wasn't a bad guy to win. All right. Moving on. Now let's talk about this. Yes. I was grabbing food, actually, and I was looking away, and then I heard Matt hit his head. And I'm watching Matt on the ground, and I see he's like got a blank look on his face.
You came back for like the aftermath, right?
Right after he went through the table and then hit his head. Like I literally started watching like right after.
Now, how weird was it to come back in the room and have nothing going on the TV for several minutes?
Well, what was weird was you could see he was trying to get up. He didn't have his legs about him, and you start wondering like, is this part of the match? What the fuck is happening? You see Aubrey doesn't know what she knows what to do. She stops the match, which we understand later. Tony kind of told her, and I'm not criticizing Aubrey. That's a situation like you don't know what they're going to do sometimes. At the end of the day, she did call it, whether it was to Tony or not, and good on her. That was good at that point, right? They took a bad bump, and we needed to stop this match at that point. We didn't do that.
No, it continued from there, and I mean, there's been a lot of news this weekend about should they have done it. Like, this is the stuff that the WWE gets criticized for.
Oh, yeah.
I think
Mike Flynn said that. He said, if WWE did this, people would have rioted, but it would not have been, acceptable.
I think even fans that are fans of AEW right now are a little upset over this, and I don't know, like, I feel like the match probably should have been stopped, but if...
Oh, yeah. He should have definitely been climbing a scaffold.
Yeah. But knowing Hardy, it's almost like, or just knowing wrestlers in general, how they want to push through and make things happen, I think it'll open a bigger discussion on when somebody should step in and make a decision to stop that and not let it go forward.
It's a weird thing. I've heard a lot of back and forth about it. Like, this happens in the UFC, which obviously is a combat sport, where a doctor will come in or they'll ask them sometimes, are you good to go? And the fighter and even the pro wrestler will almost say, yep. And it's like the doctor, which I guess was the concussion protocol, was basically Dr. Sampson going, you feel good to go? He might have asked him what day it was or whatever, and okay, fine, let him go. Yeah,
because in fighting, isn't it your like ability to defend yourself that it's really the cutoff point for when the match gets stopped?
Right. And now, granted, fighting is more dangerous, yes. But to counterpoint that, in the UFC, you don't try to climb the scaffold after that either.
No, exactly. And I mean, if he's barely able to stand up after that, I can't see how you'd give him 10 minutes and then let this continue and go up a scaffold. But the decisions that were made. I think a lot of fans felt negative about it, so we'll see how it is going forward. I think despite people's outrage, though, they will still watch AEW and stand behind the product.
Oh, I think so. This is not a good night. Chalk this one up as a loss, but that doesn't mean you can't come back and you can't learn from it either.
No, Hikaru Shita versus Thunder Rosa was the next match. And I would say, I mean, it was the last match I saw, but it's arguably the best match I saw on the night. And it just had that weird spot of coming right after Hardy. I don't know if that affected my viewing of it. I think it was the only reason I stayed one more match, because I was like, ooh, ladies match. I've been waiting for this. And I think Thunder Rosa had a good showing. Hikaru Shita, she defended that championship. She may be the least interesting champion they've had yet. But I think Thunder Rosa really built her up with this match and gave her, kind of something to build on.
This was kind of the best match they could have had for the for the women's title, having the NWA Women's Championship game in. I was well booked. I enjoyed the match. At the end of the day, unfortunately, this is another thing. I didn't think it was a match like of the night. It wasn't like a crazy blow away match, but it was solid. And I think the problem with this show was we had a lot of negative things, and we had solid things. We didn't have that one back in Revolution where we had the Bucks versus Omega and Page, and they tore it up. We didn't have that to kind of balance out everything. We had maybe one blow away match. This pay-per-view could have been probably saved. And again, solid effort by the ladies. I'll give it a slight thumbs up, but it's not super memorable.
Now, I didn't see the rest of the card, so we had the 8-man tag match next.
Okay. Actually, solid match. The crowd seemed to be into it. What was interesting about this was, basically towards the end, Rowdy Lee had set up the pin on, I don't remember if it was Marshall or Dustin, but basically they were down. I think it was Dustin, because at the end of it, Dustin got the pin. But Brody was setting Cabana up to steal the pin. And Cabana decided to go for a moonsault. He missed. Dustin Rhodes, gets the pin. And Brody, for the first time, shows anger at Cabana. He's pushing him. He's like, what the hell? I had him. And he's yelling at him like he would yell at the other Dark Order. So they kind of continued that storyline. What's even better, and that's the kind of highlight for me, is Dustin in the back. Now they tell him that, he's cutting a promo, we're going to do this for Cody, and we're not done, and it feels good to get a win. And then they tell him, well, we just been informed by Tony Khan, you're fighting Brody Lee for the TNT title this Wednesday. And Dustin's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm fighting for a title. He's so believable. He's cutting a fire, passion, and promo, and he's saying, hey, Brody, I'm coming for you. Hell's coming with me. So be ready, pal. And it's it made me okay, I want to see that match. This was actually the pay-per-view highlight for me. I bought into Dustin, and I was like, awesome. But I hope we get that. I don't know if they will, but it made me want to root for this guy.
Yeah, and it's good to see that the Dark Order has really come together as a concept, because they've been pushing that the whole time through this. Yeah. Through the creation of this company, and it didn't really hit till I'd say Brody Lee got there, and now I just think it's to another level. Next match is got to be my moment of the night, even though I didn't see it. It's FTR winning the tag titles from Omega and Page.
I'm going to show you something here. I want to get this from my boy Mike Flynn. I think I have it. Yes, I do. This is good radio right here. You want to have everybody waiting while you do this here. Yeah. Hold up, everybody. Hold the fuck up. Yeah, give me a laugh track. I love it.
Sweetening with we got to sweeten our crowd noise in the empty arena. Let me see what this button does. I don't even know what the fuck is green. Oh, sad trumpet. That has got to get used more often.
Trumpet. This whole show has not been good. Battle Royal afternoon match is good. Went too long. Tag title match. Way too long with no real crowd. And I think he had added something that basically that, I love FTR, but they don't seem to be clicking in AEW with their style. That's my point. I'm not going to 100% agree with what he's saying there. I love me some FTR. Obviously, he does too. He doesn't feel like they've clicked in his own words. However, I will say this. When they're talking about their time on the main roster and currently what they're doing now, there still has not been a match with FTR that has rivaled the matches they had with American Alpha and DIY. Those matches were so stellar, so great for tag team wrestling. We haven't seen anything like that yet. I love the FTR package. I think they're solid, but we just haven't had that great moment. We thought this would have been it, and it was nice to see them at the tag belt. However, with the crowd being kind of dead and for whatever reason, it just didn't seem like as good as it could have been. And I'm happy they got the belt, and I can't wait to see what the storyline is.
For those other matches, though, there was another great team in the ring with them making that happen. Is there another team in AEW that's up to the level of an American Alpha or a Gargano and Ciampa?
The Bucks. I think that's we still need that match.
And that's what we're building up to. And
right.
I mean, I wouldn't fault I wouldn't fault FTR for the match. I would almost fault the division you have around them. There are a lot of good teams, but there are a lot of good teams with a flippy, more acrobatic style. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but FTR, they just have a whole different style. They pattern themselves after Southern wrestling, and that's not necessarily going to gel with every team. So I think that's kind of what's hurting them in AEW.
Here's the thing, and would these matches be more dynamic in front of a hot crowd than they would most guaranteed have if we could have crowds?
That's true. Maybe that's why they're holding out on FTR versus the Bucks till they can get a more full stadium and get the reaction that match deserves, given how long it's been built up.
I do want to add this before we go on to the next match, too. It was interesting to see the aftermath where basically Omega had accidentally kneed Hangman in the face. Hangman ends up taking the pin, but Omega is pissed off at Hangman now. And Hangman goes for the embrace. Kenny looks like he's going to hit him with part of the table. Doesn't hit him, but then Hangman goes to embrace him, and Kenny just turns away and lets him fall on the ground. Afterwards, Kenny's leaving. The Bucks are like, Kenny, what are we doing? And he's like, I'm not sticking around here. You guys can follow me or not. And the Bucks don't follow him, but you're left with just like wondering what's going on. It's so funny because Hangman kind of tripped the Bucks, so it's kind of the heel move. But now here's Kenny kind of being the heel. There's a lot of shades of gray with this. It's very interesting, but I'm also at the point now, as much as I've loved this telling of this story, I do kind of want to see it concluded. I want to know who the babyface heel is.
Yeah, and that's a good storyline that they are running throughout the company. And another storyline that I think is up there is Jericho versus Orange Cassidy. And I'm not going to say I was surprised to hear that Cassidy won because, Jericho is just at a different level of his career, and it almost seems like he wants to take that chance to make the next guy. And Cassidy has been over on the independents for a while. I don't think many people in the mainstream are necessarily fans yet or necessarily get it yet. Those that do love it, but those that don't hate it. And I think this match with Jericho is going to go a step in making him more legitimate.
I thought that this had the crowd reaction of the night. The crowd that was there seemed as loud as they could be and were really into this. It wasn't a blow away match or anything. It's kind of hard to do that in this kind of gimmicky match, but I enjoyed it actually. This one I didn't mind. I don't think Mike was a fan of this. I don't think he liked it, but it's kind of a weird match. Like you're winning with so it really kind of depends on your taste. I didn't hate this one. I actually thought this was fine. Yeah, I'll give it a slight thumbs up. This match I actually kind of like.
Final match of the night: Moxley versus MJF. I was almost sure MJF was going to win the title. It just seemed like he was having such a meteoric rise. They haven't oversaturated him on TV. His run in particular up to this event was spectacular on TV. Did you think this match still helped him even though he didn't win the title?
Yeah, it definitely. He's so good. This match didn't do anything to hurt him. It was a good showcase for him. I thought he could have won the belt as well. I think he's such a hot character. However, once Lance Archer won the Casino Battle Royal, I didn't really see them booking Archer MJF kind of anytime soon. So I had my feelings that Mox was going to probably walk out with the belt. They did tease this dissension with Warlord again. Yeah, we'll see where everything goes. I love MJF. Hopefully this means down the road when he challenges for the belt again, and I believe he will, then they'll put the strap on him because I think he's the kind of guy and the kind of heel that can really turn this company around and get him even more on a hot streak. Not that they're doing great now, but I'm saying MJF's that kind of next level performer.
So this event, a lot of people came out of it disappointed. It had its bright spots, but it also kind of showed a couple glaring weaknesses. Not weaknesses, but a couple big negatives on AEW. Obviously, it's not going to affect whether you're going to watch this week, but how do you feel some of these things will be addressed on Dynamite, or will they even be addressed?
First off, one bad show doesn't kill a company. We know that. So they'll be fine.
If it did, WWE would have been done in 2016, 2017?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So one bad show don't kill nobody. That being said, yeah, we'll have to see if this gets addressed at all. And they usually come out and address things a lot of times, but I don't really know where you go from here. The Hardy stuff's already done. I think it's best just to move on. Learn from it. There was the other factor that got a little negative attention. My boy Jim Ross, who I love, made a comment about Anna Jay. There was because they thought there might have been a wardrobe malfunction, and he made a comment. He goes, "Oh, does he have a wardrobe? What's going on over there? Or is that my wishful thinking?" And then afterwards, he apologized. But he also told people, it was a joke. It was poor taste. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. But also lighten up.
We hear him do Blue Chew fucking commercials every week. It's kind of known that Jim Ross is not necessarily a dirty old man, but he's getting there.
He's from another era. But here's the thing: the New York Post picked up the story, so that's why that might be something we have to look out for. Hopefully, I don't want to see JR go, under the rug because he made one little ill-timed comment. I know people that don't like Jim will probably throw a bunch of other comments he made in Facebook. I still love Jim. I think he contributed great to the show.
They better not go after fucking JRS BBQ. I mean, we gotta have that honey mustard out there. His mama's signature ketchup. Don't attack our spice rack, fellas.
Yeah, leave it a little bit. Yeah, so we'll see what happens in the future. Overall, not the best show, but I'm a positive person. Hell, I still watch WWE events. That's how positive I am. So I'm definitely still believing in AEW. I'm pulling for them.
Well, let's say somebody came up to you and said, I haven't bought the pay-per-view yet. Do you think I should buy it? Would you recommend them buying it, or would you say save your money for the next show or something like that?
Yeah, I would say save your money for the next show. I wouldn't tell them to buy this one. No.
Okay, I mean, that's all you really need to know about it. And we're not dumping on AEW. This is just the first time we've been disappointed by them. So it's kind of a weird position to be. I mean, I still have high hopes for them. I'd love to see Matt Sydal continue with the company, but that was a rough bump. Both him and Matt Hardy, are these bumps that could end their careers? Or
I
make them...
Sydal.
You don't think so?
Sydal's fine. Yeah, actually, Randy Osgood wanted to say, he asked us if we thought Matt Hardy should retire. He thinks Matt should. He's beat up. I think George's still out. I think Matt's got some years left of him. This wasn't a great thing to happen to him, but if he passed concussion protocol now, a couple days later after going to the hospital, which it appears he has, then I'd say he should be good to go still at some point.
I don't know. That's actually pretty observant of Randy, because I'm a Matt Hardy fan, but how many of these bad bumps does he take? How beat up is he in general? How many big bumps does he have left in him?
Right. I mean, that's fair. I don't think he needs to retire at this point, but if you're a huge Matt Hardy fan and he's had a great career, this wouldn't be a bad time for him to go out either. I'm not saying, what I mean? If he went out tomorrow, I wouldn't be disappointed.
If he what if he had another bad incident like this? Would that change your mind, or is it he's just kind of a victim of circumstance? Because when you take these big risks, there are those potential factors that could hurt you.
Well, let me ask you this. What if John Moxley took a bad bump like this? I mean, I don't know. Why are we judging this on Hartford with the TLC bump?
Yeah, just from his accumulated bumps over the years, and if you're talking about him possibly being too old for the game, and would you wanna go off almost like a cherry picker type thing and take a back bump through a table and bump your head on the ground? Right. I mean, granted, he's an athlete, but that would put me out of work for a little bit.
Yeah. How about this? I would say it is in Matt Hardy's best interest to maybe rethink his style as he continues his career, if he's going to continue his career.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a Daniel Bryan thing where it's life-threatening, but almost like he's accelerating that push to the line of where it could be life-threatening, depending on the bumps he takes. Well, that was AEW. It was... what the fuck was that? That was not the button I wanted. All right. The only thing we got to say about AEW All Out was we're going to be getting so much more out of this soundboard when I figure out what these fucking buttons do. But guys, thanks for joining us for the review this week, and we will talk to you again next week.
All right, everybody, it's the Working Fans Podcast with the man they call Dave, with AJ Strangebrew, and we are about to kick off Dave versus AJ, and as usual, AJ's got no idea what the topics are gonna be.
Absolute surprise.
What people don't know is that the last time me and AJ talked and we recorded one of these, he said to me, you should pick some subjects a little more polarizing. So I did that. Now, I didn't think it all the way through, but I picked a topic really in mind because the guy on the topic would be very polarizing to AJ. The Ultimate Warrior.
Oh, God, shitfest.
So I actually, as I sent this topic out, the topic is, who had the better career, Ultimate Warrior or Bill Goldberg?
Wow.
Now, so I thought to myself, this ought to be polarizing, get the feedback. In my mind, before I even sent this out, I'm kind of leaning towards Goldberg because I'm like, different era. But I'm like, let me just see what people get back to me. Gotta be honest, AJ, the results are in. There wasn't really much feedback. I'm just going to tell you, we're going to talk about this. It's going to be more of a discussion today. It was undefeated. Goldberg all around. Everybody picked him.
He has 2 years left to his contract.
And I thought about it afterwards, too. Like, he's still doing stuff, too.
No, he came out today. There was an interview with him today, and he talked about the fact that he has 2 matches a year under a contract with the WWE, and he's signed all the way through to 2023.
He's had 2 world title runs since coming back in 2016. Yeah. He's beating Brock Lesnar and The Fiend. So, I mean, yeah.
One of the biggest undefeated, that storyline of the undefeated streak, one of the biggest stories in the history of wrestling. Yeah. I mean, now granted, going by Dave's usual customary platform as to who wins, the Ultimate Warrior did wrestle Hulk Hogan.
Wait a minute. Bill Goldberg wrestled Hogan, too, on Monday Nitro with a huge...
Well, that's the same as WrestleMania, sure.
Well, at that time period, I mean, the ratings and everything like that, I mean, we're talking about an era where I don't know if we'll ever duplicate the success.
Actually, that's the highest rated show
Nitro.
Wrestling Nitro all time.
Yeah. Actually, funny sidebar, I saw this comment and quote today, that Attitude Era. Love it or hate it. It probably didn't have the best wrestling looking back at all. A lot of great storylines, great brawling, but not necessarily pure wrestling.
When I think catch as catch can, I very much think Goldberg Hogan.
Yes. So I got this quote today, and I thought it was so unfair. I love MJF, but Dave Meltzer had quoted and said, this kid is just like The Rock was when he started. He said that basically that he's on fire. Rock had people that help him get into business. And in another 5 years, this guy could be sitting trailblazing just like The Rock did. And I thought to myself, let's not compare anybody to the motherfucking Rock.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And I love MJF, and I say he has traits of Rowdy Piper. I'm not telling you he's going to set the business on fire like 1984 Rowdy Piper. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be on fire like that. I mean, maybe, but I wouldn't say that. It's not fair.
Here's the problem. How many times for 30 years did we hear, hey, this kid's the next Ric Flair?
Oh, sure.
They tried to do it to Austin.
Michaels. You name it.
They put the tag on anybody that was hot or anybody that Flair wrestled. Hey, Flair's making this guy. He's going to be the next Ric Flair. Yeah. It's not fair to put that moniker on anyone. Same thing with The Rock. And with The Rock, not only are you putting the wrestling moniker on him, but the guy's the freaking biggest box office draw in movie history also now. So it's absolutely terrifying.
I'm going to get back to this time period, though. I'm also going to read one of the people who wrote in who really put it over the top for me that I decided that this was going to be more of a discussion. AJ, I think you're going to really like Scott. This was his reply. Oof. You know how much I dislike Warrior, but I'll try to be fair, unlike Warrior. I'm actually going to try. Warrior had to look and... well, that was about it. He was a big draw during his IC run on house shows, but once he won the world title, it was downhill fast from there. He was a draw for a longer period of time and held the belt longer, even if no one remembers his title run. At the peak, Goldberg was the bigger draw. To me, after WrestleMania 6, it felt like Hogan was being replaced by a one-dimensional cartoon character, while Goldberg beating Hogan felt like a legitimate, unstoppable badass was taking over the business. I was sad when Warrior became the champion because he still felt less than Hogan at that time, but I was losing my shit when Goldberg pinned Hogan on TV, even though at that point I knew the outcome was predetermined. That's how believable he felt. I think what hurt Warrior the most was he was all physique, entrance intensity. Destrucity, and of course the fact he's a piece of shit, while Goldberg, as limited as his skills were, was mostly the victim of garbage booking, or the company just threw the bookers while it was going under. Warrior was just some juice head who couldn't cut a promo in English and dressed like a girl's bicycle. He should have been the one to drop the title from getting tased, since the one thing he was good at was shaking all the damn time. Goldberg's promos got old fast because they were typically just 2 words, but that was all he needed to say. Ultimately, that's the reason I'm giving it to Goldberg, because he wasn't the one who cut all those hateful promos after his in-ring career ended, like wishing Bobby Heenan would die from cancer. I actually didn't know Warrior said that. While I'm glad Warrior didn't live long enough to see Heenan die from cancer, I hope Warrior is endlessly convulsing somewhere, puking while black shit runs down his forehead in hell. Thank you, Scott.
I agree with Scott.
Yeah, I figured. I will quote one more thing, and I will let you have your way. Lance Storm had this to say, ironically, as I was sending this out. A word of caution to anyone who decides to hate or love a wrestler based on what you've heard others say. Go watch the Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior DVD, then his Hall of Fame introduction. People lie and opinions change. Don't judge them too harshly if you've never met them. Lance is a better person probably than most of us. AJ, go ahead with your comments.
All right. Well, I disagree with Lance.
You never did like him.
On this subject, in general, absolutely love Lance.
You do, I know you do.
But, however, I'm going to deep dive into Warrior for the first time. Usually I do something similar to what Scott did. He polarizes me greatly. I cannot stand the Ultimate Warrior. But we'll go into his wrestling career here, and I'm going to try to be as professional as possible here.
Take us through, because you didn't hate the initial time you saw Warrior. Tell us about him.
I didn't.
Right.
The first time I saw the Warrior was actually as the Dingo Warrior in Texas in World Class Championship Wrestling. And at that point, he was actually a heel with Rick Rude. And similar to what happened in the WWE when he was on the undercard and working with a mouthpiece and having somebody speak for him, they were able to cover up his shortcomings. When he got to the WWE, they continued to cover up his shortcomings because with the Intercontinental Championship, he worked with people once again, this time wrestling against Rick Rude, and he was working with guys in short matches who could cover up and make him look better.
Similar.
However,
similar to Goldberg, though.
But, well, no, and that is very similar.
And that part.
But here's the thing about Warrior. The way you get booked as a world champion is eventually you as a world champion have to carry others.
Right.
And eventually you have to wrestle longer matches. Once the Warrior started having to wrestle longer matches, you could start to see that his cardio wasn't quite what his physical outpouring would appear to be. Yeah. And now looking back, some of that could have been heart problems showing up early, to be honest with you. But he would get blown up in anything over a 4-minute match. Now, Goldberg's a little bit different because Goldberg's shortcoming wasn't that he was getting blown up in matches. It was just that coming from the power plant, having a limited wrestling background, he didn't have the years that Warrior had put in beforehand. Warrior wrestled in California. He then went to Mid-South, wrestled in UWF. He wrestled in Texas. By all means, he had years of chances of getting experience. Goldberg went into the power plant, was there for about a year, and that was wrestling Hulk Hogan.
Right. You know, that they have a lot more in common than I realized, though. Like, as you're talking, like, both were basically brought up kind of the same way, but you're right, Warrior had more of a chance to get better, but they were pushed in a similar fashion.
Well, now look at the difference also.
They both hurt people.
Well, Ultimate Warrior, though, never evolved.
Right.
Goldberg, in recent years, as we've seen him as a 50-something-year-old man, I think he's 53 now, he actually has evolved and is better than he was in years prior. Ultimate Warrior, you never saw an evolution at all.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not so much in the in-ring, but I was going to say the one thing I think that really differs between the two is Goldberg has really evolved in his promos. Yes. And
even in the ring, I know people will look at the match that he had with Taker and go, well, he struggled in that match. The guy knocked his ass out in the middle of the match.
Wow, yeah. I wouldn't put that in it. You know what, though? I will say this. Goldberg has learned what he does well, and he sticks to what he does well.
Exactly. And his matches are still about 5 minutes long.
Which is what it should be. Yeah.
Yeah. And part of wrestling is that. Hulk Hogan, in his heyday, even though he could put on a long match, he knew what he did well, what to focus on, what the fans wanted, and gave that to the fans. He knew that he could extend the match by using what we call rest holds.
Work a hold, brother.
Yeah, but what he would do is he would let the monsters get their heat on him, and then it would stage the big comeback where he would finally get his heat back, and he could extend that as far as into like a 17-minute match and still get a good match out of it. Yeah. Warrior never let anybody get heat on him.
Yeah, I would say the biggest difference between these two, at least as performers go, is that Goldberg's one of the most believable guys ever in the sport, to be fair. Like Goldberg
whereas nobody, I think, finds the Warrior believable. Like Scott said, he was more of a giant cartoon character. Nobody's ever been like, wow, wouldn't want to get in a shoot with that guy.
Right. Whereas
Goldberg looks and is a legitimate badass.
And I have to say, too, as time went on, Goldberg had the better promo, too. Which wasn't hard.
Now, because we promised polarizing, I do want to put this out there because I think I've been more than fair to the Ultimate Warrior during this.
Yes.
Similar to what Scott said, he was a bigot.
Yeah.
He was a piece of shit. And he was so self-righteous that it literally made me sick to my absolute stomach. So I agree with Scott wholeheartedly like that.
He did love his kids.
No, by all means, from what we hear, he was a good father, good husband. That's great.
Yeah. And he might have got...
However, as an all-around human being, I have no room for the Ultimate Warrior anywhere.
Well... You know what? I don't think there's a lot else to be said on this subject this week. I did enjoy the Warrior as a kid. Looking back, clearly I don't watch a lot of Ultimate Warrior matches anymore. I was a child.
Hey, similar to the Undertaker's trying to bury the Ultimate Warrior, I wish Vince would have done it sooner.
Well, on that note, I think you had a little Undertaker technical difficulties there for a second. I don't know if Undertaker's in your house, but I'd watch out. All right, folks. That's going to be it for this week. Goldberg was the clear winner. We'll be back next week with some more of AJ versus Dave.
Hello, everybody. It's former WWE superstar Al Snow, and you're listening to the Working Fan Podcast.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Working Fans Podcast. This is Dave with AJ, and we have a true legend today. Guy who's competed in WWE, ECW, and all over. Al Snow. Actually, this guy also might be one of the only guys to get his doll banned from Walmart. Al? I actually was reminded about this the other day. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still on the list of, I believe it's 27 things that Walmart refuses to sell as it is endangerment to society, and I'm number 5 on that list. I was beat out by Pregnant Barbie. She's number 1.
That's not an easy list to crack into.
No, it's not. It's not. And, you really think about it. I mean, you can still, I believe, go find an assault rifle and ammunition to dismember your, victim if you want. But God help you if you get my action figure. That will be a training manual for future spousal abusers.
Oh, my God. That's tremendous. I forgot all about that.
Al, on a personal note, I want to actually thank you for coming up with the collar and elbow clothing line. I worked for 10 years. I was trained by Adrian Street, and I'm 6'3" and about 280 pounds. And to have clothing that I can wear that is comfortable and still fashionable at the same time, I appreciate that. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I owe a lot of that to my partner Rod and really our designer Dean Whitaker. He's the magic in the sauce. He's amazing. He's so great at, coming up with designs that kind of, if you're a wrestling fan, you get it. And if you're not a wrestling fan, you just go, oh, that's cool. I really like that. And you don't even, you don't know what it's about or anything.
You were trained by a gentleman named Jim Lancaster. Is that correct?
Yes.
What was his background? I don't know much about Jim.
Jim had started in the 70s and was pretty much a journeyman wrestler. He worked all the territories. He worked pretty much in the mid-card, and when I met him in 81, he was just getting off the road full-time and was, trying to start running his own shows, and he wanted to get his own crew of guys that he could rely on and kind of, make sure that they were where they needed to be, because what motivated him to do that was he was running a show, and Spike Huber, who was Dick the Bruiser's son-in-law, was pretty popular in the Midwest at the time. He was a pretty big babyface. Jim had promoted him for a show, and then Dick pulled him at the last second without giving Jim the heads up, and then was sending him to St. Louis. And, Jim got upset about that and decided he'd just get his own crew of guys that could control and do something with himself. So when I had first met Jim, I tried to convince him to train me, and he wouldn't agree to do it. He had no interest, and then that's what changed, and that's how I was able to finally convince someone to train me, and that was where it began.
Did you go to the camp with Ole and Gene before or after that?
Before. I went down for, wasn't a camp, it was a tryout, they called it, down in Charlotte, which was basically just, where they were going to blow guys up and stretch them, and then, if one guy would, if anybody would survive, they would take them and, see what they could do with them. And it was funny, years later, I was riding with Sandy Scott in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Sandy and I developed a really close relationship, and I told him the story about going down there, and there was one guy, there was a young black guy that he had only had taken an interest in. He was the only guy that really kind of made it, and he had set him aside, and I was talking to Sandy, and Sandy brought up the fact that he remembered seeing Ole bring this kid into the local YMCA, because you got to understand, back then, the only place you really worked out or trained was the YMCA. Wrestlers didn't have schools, like there wasn't the proliferation of schools like there are now, because the business was so closed. So, they would bring guys into the local YMCA, and I guess he lasted maybe 2 or 3 workouts, and then he never showed back up again after that.
Was it these early experiences? Is that what drove you to what you do today, which is run arguably one of the best training facilities in the U.S. in OVW?
I guess it's just my love for the wrestling business. That's what's drove me to, want to pass it on and try to pass on the real essence of the art of professional wrestling. I think it's kind of being lost, like I said, with the proliferation of wrestling schools and the fact that these days anybody can basically just rent a building and, regardless of their amount of experience, they can, and what type, that's another thing, what type of experience, they can proclaim that they're a trainer, and these young kids who have aspirations and hopes, that someday they can become a superstar. They come running and want to be trained. They're basically brought into a ring, and in about a matter of a week or two, they're taught how to what we call take a bump, which they think is about how to land when it's really how to control yourself physically. And then they're taught to hit the ropes and, a couple wrestling moves and some spots, and then maybe a month later they're in their first match. And it's unfair to these prospective athletes, these young men and women, I feel, because they're not really being taught or have an understanding of what they're being taught or why they should understand it or know it to really have a chance at being successful. And I mean really, truly successful. When you go to a platform like WWE, you have such an incredible opportunity, regardless of what the popular conception is. When you walk out in that ring, that is 100% on you to make the most of that opportunity. That every time you go to that ring, it's an opportunity. And, you can become the thing that people are tuning in every week to see. You can become the thing that people are buying a ticket to watch. And there's nothing anybody can do to stop that, and there's nothing anybody can do to help you do it either. You've got to be willing and be able to do it and understand how to do it on your own.
Now, Al, I'm kind of curious, all your years in wrestling and now training, is there something you have a preference to, training or performing?
I don't really have of course I love to perform. I mean, there's no bigger rush in the world than to go out there and be in front of an audience and connect with them, emotionally and get them to elicit a response and a reaction and tell a story and have them really emotionally connected and be involved in it. There's nothing like that. But it's very rewarding to, train these young men and women, let them benefit from where you make your mistakes, and watch them go on and succeed. It's a thrill too. And I try to explain to them, every person that I train, and I've been pretty prolific as far as training. I mean, I have a lot of people that have went on to have very successful careers that I've trained. And I tell them all that, their success is my success. I'm never going to lie to them. I'm never going to mislead them. I'm never going to, I'm always going to be honest with them. I'm going to set standards for them, because when I was brought into the wrestling business, the people that brought you in were held personally accountable for everything you did. To this day, some of the old timers, if they hear this interview and they don't like something that I said, they'll call Jim Lancaster, and then Jim Lancaster's going to call me. And I'm going to have to explain, because I'm a reflection on him. As long as I'm in this business, I'm a reflection on him and his professional accomplishments. And back in the day, if you screwed up and you hurt business, well, then Jim would get blackballed. He didn't get booked anymore, because the heat would go on him, because they would assume it's his responsibility to make sure that I didn't screw up like that. So I still hold that attitude to this day, that these people are very much a representation of me, and that they definitely, unquestionably carry my reputation around with them. And so I'm going to do absolutely everything I can, even sometimes in spite of them, to ensure that they have the best possible chance to succeed, no matter what the degree is, and be a professional representation in the wrestling business.
That's interesting. I think I actually did hear one of the wrestlers one time said, might have been Nash or someone, that it was a Jody Hamilton guy, and that actually opened some doors for him. They're like, oh no, he's polite, he knows the protocol, he's a Jody Hamilton guy. So
that's right.
Yeah,
that'll open doors for you. And if you put out enough bad guys, it'll close doors too. Right. And I'm not gonna let that happen. I'm not gonna let people use my name and then it start closing doors because of them being irresponsible. So
now,
to that end, that's why I apologize, but to that end, that's why we've taken great time and effort and expense. It's taken us over a year to get accreditation by the state of Kentucky, the proprietary education office, as an actual accredited trade school.
Oh wow!
It's an effort. We're the first and only one in the world, and that was all done so that we could not just teach these young men and women skills in the ring, but to teach them skills backstage too, so that it would give them even a better understanding of what it is they're doing in the ring and be better performers, but also to give them more assets within the wrestling business and entertainment business and the broadcasting business, to be able to, when their in-ring careers come to an end, to be able to pursue something else and have opportunities outside of the ring.
Al, I'm sorry to interrupt. Now, like an old timer like myself, I'm not that old. I'm only 43, but someone who I'm obviously not going to return to the ring anytime soon. If I wanted to come down there and learn to do the backstage stuff, do you have programs set up where somebody can come and actually learn the backstage by itself?
Yes, they can come and learn that. They still participate in the in-ring classes. They just don't physically participate in the in-ring classes. What they do is they sit and they take notes. It's so that way you have a better understanding of what it is we're really selling in wrestling, and how you go about doing that, so that when you're backstage and you're either producing or you're directing or you're running a camera or you're doing lighting or you're doing writing, you have a feel, a sense, an understanding of what the product is and how to best approach it and sell it, so that it comes across and makes a complete picture. Kind of hard if you've never driven a car, you've never sat in a seat, you've never experienced that feeling. It's very hard for you to be a car salesman, successful car salesman. It's just that simple. You've never drank a beer. How are you going to go around and be a beer distributor? You know what I mean? It's hard to sell an experience if you've never properly done it. Now, you can do it. There are lots of people today that do it, but they don't. There's a certain essence to it that you need to feel and understand to really, really get it across. And that way, the more you can grasp that, the more successful you are, even backstage.
Plus, it's interesting, too, because, you're giving these guys training on everything, and if you think about it, how many times, it doesn't happen all the time, obviously, but how many times has an announcer unexpectedly ended up being a part of an angle or something? You're almost kind of preparing people for the unexpected, possibly, too, it seems like.
And there's nothing, and listen, everything is possible in wrestling. Every time, it's a matter of the right thing at the right time for the right reason, and it could create a completely different opportunity that creates a completely different doorway for your career to expand exponentially, or for you to fail miserably. Think of the wrestlers, especially in recent years, like even I myself and Taz made that transition to being commentators. And then think of all the, Corey Graves and all these other ones that have made that transition into being commentators and now have careers doing that. You walk in the door with those skills already in your back pocket, then when opportunities present themselves, you can capitalize on them and still have a career outside of the ring.
So you're giving them the best tool that they could have, which is preparation.
Yes, preparation and the benefit of having instructors who have actual experience. Because I've said this 100 times, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Having an access to information does not equate to having knowledge over a subject. I hate to break it to everyone that's on the internet, but you can access as much information as you want about any topic you want, and that does not make you an expert on it. Having information and then the commensurate amount of experience, even bad experience where you screwed up, gives you knowledge, gives you an understanding on a level that just acquiring the information through a book does not.
Well, that's funny, Al. Actually, I was saying to someone the other day, almost any job I've ever had in my life, too, when I was training to do something, I felt I've learned more through messing up a lot of times. Like, I'm not going to do that again, and you learn more sometimes, too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's no different than when you have kids and you tell the kid over and over again, don't touch the stove, it's hot, don't touch the stove, it's hot. And sometimes you got to let them touch the stove. It ain't going to kill them. So they can understand and have a relationship to the term, what is hot and what it means because of your warning that it's now dangerous because it kind of stung. It hurt them.
Al, that's excellent points. I think that anybody who's been in the business for any amount of times at this point realizes that there's no school out there that's actually better than the one that you're running. All you have to do is look at the athletes that have come out of it and look at your storied career to understand that. We were wondering if you had any stories from either early in your career or after your WWE run from when you worked on the indies for us.
I got plenty of stories. I mean, there's always stories. I mean, good God, this business, it got to a point that I got to where I started embracing the ridiculousness and the unusual, and almost would be disappointed if I went to a booking and nothing happened. That was out of the ordinary. And I would be disappointed, I went out for one of the guys who's kind of like a protege of mine, Matt Yaden, who runs Rocky Mountain Pro, and he's doing really well out there. And the first time I went out for like two shows, and the first show I was like, you guys do great. I mean, you run a professional thing, and I'm just really disappointed. And he goes, why? I go, because I don't have any stories. Like, you don't have any eccentric or goofy people here. And he goes, don't worry, I'll make a call. So he calls this kid who shows up because he tells me that the kid believes that he's a ninja, and will tell you that he's, trained as a ninja and all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, I can't wait to have a conversation with this guy. So of course I immediately sit down and start talking to him, and it takes a minute, but I'm listening to him tell his life story to me, and I suddenly realize, hey, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. And he keeps talking, and then it hits me. He's telling me the screenplay to a 1980s movie called American Ninja. The entire screenplay is his life story.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, this is fantastic. So later, I see him over there, and he's doing like katas, and he's opened the door. And this is a hockey arena, so the walls are made of cinder blocks. So he's over there, and he's got the door open, and he's swinging he's doing like a karate chop at the door frame, the concrete block. And I'm like, watching him do it a couple times. I go, you can break concrete blocks with your hand? He goes, oh, yeah, I've done it before. I go, really? He's like, yeah. I go, well, you got to show me. I mean, come on, man, you got to show me. So he lines up, and he just, all of a sudden, you just hear, he hits his hand, and He could tell it hurt, and he goes, I go, what happened? It didn't break. He goes, I was not focused. I go, well, you got to focus, man. You got to pull yourself together and, see if you can do it again. So this guy, listen, nobody ever should listen to me. So he opens the door further and he steps back. Now he's going to really put some stank on it. Mm-hmm. And he's really, I don't know how he's not hyperventilating while he's doing it, because he's breathing so deeply. He finally lets go, and you just hear this crack, and his hand looks all misshapen, the bottom two fingers, and he just walks over real quick and picks up his phone and starts touching it, playing with it, but you can see the other two fingers are sticking out. He literally broke his hand trying to prove that he could. And I'm like, what happened? They didn't break. And he's like, sometimes, I just can't focus. And I said, I understand that. That happens all the time. So.
Oh, my God.
You broke the American Ninja.
I didn't. He broke himself.
Yeah, that's true.
Facilitate his belief that he could.
Al, that's actually kind of an interesting segue for me, because I love pro wrestling, but I'm also an MMA fan over the last few years, too. A buddy of mine was telling me that you actually talked about doing some underground fighting in your book. And I was just wondering how that came about. And, do you have some a particular martial arts experience that you know? And
I trained in jiu-jitsu, and I trained in Kempo karate, and, plus I've got about 3 or 4 other belts that I bought at JCPenney's. They mean nothing. Unless you keep up with the training, it's not like, it's any other skill. But, I'm not real proud of it, but at the time I had opened up my school in Ohio and was taking a ring down to every Monday night. This bar would run like a tough man contest. So I'd bring my ring down there. I'd set it up by myself, and I'd hang out. One of the bar owners also ran basically like garage fights, and, found out I was a wrestler and was like, hey, would you like to make some extra money? And explained it to me. And so, the first night I went, and I basically had done some boxing, but not a lot. And, didn't fare too well. Took a lot of punches. Lost that one. And then it just so happened that where I had my wrestling school, in the front of the building was an old boxing gym. And a very old trainer named Mr. Akers was a wonderful old guy. And a guy by the name of Mr. Bazell, who he would spar with Muhammad Ali. They were trainers up there, and so I went up, and I would, during the day when I didn't have anybody in the wrestling school, I would go up and spend time with them, and they started showing me how to slip punches and things like that. And so the next time I, kind of did a little better, not getting hit as much, hitting more, and then I thought, well, screw this, and I just ducked under and I dropped behind the guy and, choked him out. That took place in an uproar because I didn't realize there were rules, but apparently I thought there were no rules. But then people were hot, but they were also excited, and it was something different because at that time, MMA wasn't a big thing. And as a result, they wanted me to come back. So I'd done a couple more of those kinds of things, and it went on for a few fights, and then a couple brothers got upset and confronted me at the bar one night, and we got into a situation, and that didn't go well. And I was like, enough of this. I'm done with it. So that's why I say this, real fights suck. The work fights, wrestling, it's so much more fun.
We were talking before with some other interviews about creative seems to come up a lot. John Moxley had recently done an interview with Jericho where, he had basically said he was very thankful for his time in WWE. But he talked about one of the main issues he had was with creative. You had a lot of different characters. I'm just curious, we're not trying to make you bury anything, but creatively, what are some maybe things you didn't like or did like?
The only issue I ever had was that nobody ever really spoke to me. Nobody ever talked, and that was partly, I admit to it, I talk about it in my book, that, it was also my fault because I never asked questions. I should have a lot of times in a lot of situations, a lot of instances came to them and go, hey, okay, what is it we're doing? Why are we doing this? What are you wanting out of it? What direction are we going? Things like that. But I literally would show up at TV and I never knew what was happening. Nobody ever spoke to me. Nobody ever contacted me. I remember doing some pre-tape with Hunter and Stephanie, and Hunter alluding to, this is an opportunity for a spot or something before a cage match with Jeff Hardy, and Matt Hardy was involved, and Marlena, and I'm thinking, what the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean? I had no idea. And then I find out years later, there was a rumor that I was being considered for a spot in DX, and I'm like, nobody told me. I had a thing where I showed up and they just, you're going to walk down, with a Vince McMahon suit on and his rubber mask on. You're going to go to the ring. And I'm like, okay. And Vince is going to come out and ball shot you. And I'm like, all right. And, again, my fault. I should have stopped and went, hey, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? But nobody called me on the phone. Nobody discussed anything with me. They just literally threw me in places and made, and had me doing things. And again, I take the responsibility for not asking it, but, everybody brings up characters and stuff that I did, but a large part of that was that they were trying to find a voice, a character, something you could describe me with that would connect with the audience. And, like everybody does talks about the avatar, and that was my fault. If I knew then what I know now, I could have utilized that and made that more successful. But at that time, I had spent 14, 15 years as a heel and being a smart-ass chicken shit heel. And now all of a sudden I'm thrust into a situation where I'm supposed to be a babyface, but not, carry a mask out, but then put it on, then wrestle with it, then take it back off. And that's all the direction you're given, And it's up to you then to make the most of that and create something out of it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's on 100% on you. And I know things have changed up there now where they have more of a direct hand. I think they overproduce the talent, but I know that's because they don't feel confident that the talent understand what it is they're really out there to try to do. And I do understand that the reason they don't is because that's not being taught anymore. The talent are now performing like, I just got to go out there and have a really good match. And that's not it. You've got to go have a really good match. You have to have a good match that motivates people to want to see you again. And that's a different mindset. That's a different approach. You can have the greatest match in the history of wrestling. Nobody paid to see it. What does it matter? Or if you had it in a building that seats 5,000 people, and let's say 5,000 people showed up to see that greatest match in the history of wrestling, and then next month you showed back up and only 800 people showed up, then how great was that wrestling match?
Oh, exactly.
The purpose, the sole reason, the absolute pure existence of a wrestler is to do one thing, and that is to use that time in the ring to motivate someone to leave their home, the comfort, security, and safety of their home, drive to a building, pay money to park, to pay money to get in the building, to sit in a seat that you don't want to sit in. Let's face it, guys, you don't want to sit in those seats. They're the shits. And you want to sit around people you don't want to sit around, and pay for food you don't want to eat to watch that guy do his job.
Oh, 100%, Alan. I can tell you that we were both fans going back, like we said, to Smoky Mountain, and to watch you explode the way you did coming out of the ECW arena and make the most out of a mannequin head, absolutely phenomenal. The way you connected with the audience, whether it was just, I don't know, you just had that connection with people that made all of us get up on our feet and cheer. So you definitely did.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you definitely put our asses in the seats, I can tell you that.
Well, it took a lot of years and a lot of mistakes, and even once I had gotten something like that, still trying to understand what it was I had and be able to capitalize on it, in which, if I had understood more, and again, if I knew as much as I do now, based on my experience as I would have been, I could have capitalized on a lot more of those opportunities that were given to me, and I could have made much more of it than what I did. So, but I'm not complaining. I haven't done as much as some, but I've done a lot more than many, and I've lasted a lot longer than most. So,
we appreciate everything you even giving us some time this week. I don't want to keep you too long. So just one more thing before we have you promote anything.
Sure.
Doing a holiday episode coming up for Thanksgiving, so we've been asking a lot of guests. Is there anything you're thankful for?
Well, I'm thankful for my wife and my family. Can't be thankful enough for them. That's the truth. I mean, I'm really blessed to have them, and thankful for my health. I'm thankful that I have gotten to be a professional wrestler for as long as I've gotten to be it, and to do the thing that I love to do as long as I've gotten to do it. And now I get to own OVW and help young men and women try to go out and do the same things that they want to do.
Is there anything you want to promote, Al?
Oh, God, lots of things.
Do it.
My book's out there. You can get it on Amazon. It's called Self-Help. I wanted to call it How to Take Crap and Make Shoe Polish and other life lessons I learned from wrestling, but the publisher didn't want to do that, so they decided to call it self-help. You can read even more ridiculous stories, like a 3-hour car ride with 6 midgets that involved almost one of them dying and me getting banned from IHOP, and different taser stories where I got people tasered. One that everybody likes is where a promoter and his son were tag team champions and had cowboy gimmick, and they rode horses to the ring, and the ensuing ridiculousness that happened from that was pretty funny. And OV Wrestling, OVWrestling.com, Ohio Valley Wrestling. That's OVW. If you guys have an interest, you can go on YouTube. We are live every Tuesday night on WBNA Channel 21 here locally in Louisville, and we're live every Tuesday night on YouTube. You just got to go to OVW TV on YouTube, and you can watch it live with the rest of everybody else. And ASWA.live is the certified state-accredited trade school, which is in association with OVW, if you want to go and find more information about that. If you want to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, it's The Real Al Snow. I do have the check marks and all of that now, but before I had to call myself The Real Al Snow because there were some fakes, and I would actually message them and go, look, I don't mind you doing this, but if you're going to fake being a celebrity, don't you think you should put the bar a little higher? I mean, come on. I'm not even going to fake being me. So why would you?
That's perfect, Al. I appreciate it, man. You've been very kind. I can't say it enough, man. We appreciate it a lot. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys for giving me the time. I appreciate you guys, keeping me alive and keeping me relevant out there.
Yeah.
Welcome back, fans, for another week of the 531, where we take our top 5 list on a particular subject, vote it down to a top 3, and then debate that down to a number 1 spot. And this week, we have a very interesting topic. Dave, we're doing the top 5 charismatic wrestlers.
Charismatic, baby. Who can talk, who can get you to feel stuff. It doesn't have to be talk necessarily, right? It can be like how they perform in the ring, the way they look, but they just ooze charisma. An example I gave to this to people was when we did our top 5 interviews, as good as The Rock is, he didn't quite make my top 5 interviews. But I'm charismatic, spoiler alert, The Rock will be on my list.
Nice. And Jesse from New Hampshire brings us our first list. He's got Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, John Cena, Shawn Michaels, and Ric Flair.
Yeah, no denying that. I mean, all those guys are top performers. I have a lot of the lists this week, so I will tell you that surprisingly, Cena doesn't make a lot of people's lists.
No, and he's not necessarily somebody I would have thought about, but I also didn't watch a lot during the Cena years where he got big. I mean, there's no denying what Hogan can do. I mean, we lived through Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, and Ric Flair just seems to be charismatic his whole career, my whole lifetime that I remember at least.
Say what you will about Ric Flair, but I mean, that's a guy to me that transcends a little bit. I mean, you're talking about rappers, professional athletes, football players who walk around the locker room on stage going, kiss feeling, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying. Woo! I mean, come on, the guy's like 70-something years old and people are still imitating him. Transcend. Big deal.
Huge. Now, I'm going to bring you my second list, the last list that I have. I've got Ric Flair. I've got Shawn Michaels. I got Brian Pillman.
Good.
I got Eli Drake, and I have The Rock.
Very good. Eli Drake, huh? Yeah, that's not bad. He's one that might not make the list because he's not like in that legendary status, but like he's a very charismatic guy.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like the most charismatic people in wrestling, and I feel like he's got to make a modern run for that. Especially everything he's done from what we've seen from him in Impact, especially NWA. And just going forward.
I mean, one thing about NWA is the way it's set up in the studio, you kind of have to be a good talker. You can't fluff that in, or phone that in. You got to be able to have the chops. He does.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, since I have all the other lists, I'll run the marathon here. Let's start off with Jake St. John, author, friend of the show. He's got The Rock, Dusty Rhodes, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Ric Flair, and as he put it, He almost put down Gorgeous George, not Macho Man Randy Savage's girlfriend, but Gorgeous George. But then he decided with, in his words, Rowdy fucking Piper. I went back and I watched a bunch of Piper stuff earlier this week where he made a babyface turn in Georgia Championship Wrestling. So good. Like, Piper and his early WWF stuff and before is just legendary.
I'm really sad I didn't include Piper or Rhodes on my list. I feel like those are two legendary names that when you're talking charisma in wrestling, they're almost like on the Mount Washington, I would think, right up there with Flair.
Yeah, no shit. They're definitely there. I think we're going to see Dusty a few more times. In fact, we'll go to AJ's list. Here's a name you're not going to see a lot, but he definitely deserves it.
Luthez?
Dog. What's that?
I was going to say Luthez or Hackenschmidt.
Fucking Luthez, yeah. Berm Gagne, no. AJ Strangebrew.
I just had to hit the cough button.
AJ Strangebrew.
Oh my God. I had to hit the cough button there, but I had to, you popped me huge on that.
Anyway, back to reality, as Shawn Michaels said after his match with Hulk Hogan. Junkyard Dog, JYD, who could definitely get the crowd going with just a look. Superstar Billy Graham, Dusty Rhodes, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and The Rock. You know, like I said, JYD, someone to look out for. And surprisingly, you're going to see him on a few upcoming lists. A lot of our fans, very smart. Superstar Billy Graham makes this list a few times.
Wow, I was surprised. I don't know. I guess I'm kind of surprised to hear Junkyard Dog. I mean, for what he did in the Mid-South area, he was out of hand. And, I mean, he got over when he was in the WWE. But that's not a list that it sounds like AJ threw together at the last second or looked up on us. It's a really solid list, and it's kind of what I would figure for, like, his wheelhouse of being a little older than us.
Well, you know, me and him, actually, for this particular list, he was helping around my house. I mentioned this, but he might have put a little more thought into this one. So, hats off. I guess that's underhanded and backhanded way of saying, AJ, you did a good job this week, pal. Let's bring it on with one of our big supporters, Zach St. John, brother of Jake from Griswold. And he's got also superstar Billy Graham. Says he's been watching a lot of Billy Graham stuff lately. He's a big fan. Heartbreak Kid. He's got Ric Flair, The Rock, and what you gonna do, Hulk Hogan. I mean, we're gonna see some of these names multiple times. You know, there's no denying the charisma of Hulk Hogan. I mean, the guy with the pose and everything, he oozes charisma. There's no doubt.
Exactly, and I mean, he's a garbage-ass wrestler if you go back and watch his matches, but there is a reason that a lot of people around our age have such a fandom of Hogan, even after the sex tape and what he said about black people.
Yeah. He didn't say he was a stand-up person in his life. We found out some things.
No, but he's got the charisma to kind of live through those tragedies, and that's something in itself.
He does. And, you know...
God damn, the motherfucking ice cream truck again. It's
shit.
Fucking full!
Shut it down. All right.
God, that motherfucker's going to be back around in 10 minutes, so get ready for it.
I'm going to move on to another list. You can't stop us. We continue to roll. We got Scott from Voluntown, friend of the show. He's got Ric Flair, Eddie Guerrero,
wow,
The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and this is how he wrote it to me. Captain Chris, I'm just kidding, Dusty Rhodes. So, no offense, Kristen, you didn't quite make the list. However, hats off to Scott for mentioning Eddie Guerrero. I don't know, I don't know what my top 5 is. Eddie's not on it. But, boy, Eddie's a charismatic guy, and I'm glad Scott mentioned him. I'm glad somebody mentioned him because he deserves to be mentioned.
Exactly, and it was that kind of charisma that I think helped him in WWE overcome the bias they have to size.
He's Shawn Michaels and Brett a little bit, but I know Bruce Pritchard tells the story where he's like, Vince first sees him, and he's like, he's tiny. Look how tiny he is. And Bruce actually says, that's the next Mexican Shawn Michaels right there, though. And, Vince has said, if you watch the Eddie Guerrero's DVD documentary when they thought about giving Eddie like a second, third chance. There's not a lot of people they would do that for, but Eddie was special. So I think that
true.
says a lot.
I didn't even think about him living through those drug problems at the WWE and how much that charisma probably helped him keep a job and get other chances.
No, there's no doubt. And he really flourished in WWE. As much as we criticize people like now for WWE dropping the ball, it was Eddie who had great matches in WCW, but when he got to WWE, his personality really just shined through. The whole Latino heat, the live heat feel, just so good, so good.
And he also kind of seemed to avoid some of the pitfalls of WWE's racist portrayal of certain foreigners.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to get me in the middle here a little bit. I got Dusty Rhodes, The Rock, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. I didn't mix it up much. Those are the guys I think are most charismatic. At the end of the day, to me, Dusty and The Rock are really two of the guys I had to spread the top two here. I mean, Dusty to me just could hold a room like no other. The Hard Times promo, need I say more? And The Rock, the guy is like the biggest name in Hollywood right now. People know how charismatic this guy was. So that's where I land on those guys.
Yeah, Dusty is huge, and I don't even know what else to say about him. He's kind of right up there with Flair, with somebody that's given good interviews our whole life. And I mean, even in like the later years when he might have been rehashing some things for the third or fourth time in a promo, like say maybe ECW or even MLW, he was still compelling. So he's one of those guys that could almost give you the same act year after year, and you still enjoyed him nonetheless.
He knew how to say it, and he knew when to say it, more importantly.
Very true.
I'm going to move on here. We got Tim Hartford. Tim actually gave us a Jake St. John treatment and gave us a few honorable mentions. Chris Jericho, Goldust, Booker T, and Diamond Dallas Page. I'll tell you about DDP. That's the guy I think who learned charisma even more so later in his career. When you look at his Hall of Fame speech and how he talks now, this guy just became super, super good on the mic. He always was, but he got even better as time went on.
Do you think that's helped him launch the DDPY, or do you think that's just his natural push?
I think that's naturally how he is, but I think it definitely helped get his brand out there. The fact that he's become such a good talker, and the fact that he 100% immerses himself in whatever he does. You know, he's the general line article, and for everything we've heard, he's kind of that character. That's who he is, like 24/7. And
he's a charismatic person, but it almost seems like he's also like a virtuistic person, not necessarily somebody that might be all charisma. Because if you look at what he did for his friends Scott Hall and Jake the Snake, that's huge, and that's a different level of good guy.
100%. Now, the rest of Tim Hartford's actual list is HBK, Ric Flair, Superstar Billy Graham, Dusty Rhodes, and The Rock. And draw a little connection here. DDP, he credits so much of what he does because of Dusty Rhodes.
Wow, and Tim Storm, former guest on the show, also had a Dusty as a huge influence on him.
Absolutely. All right, let's wrap up with the final two. Mike Flynn gave us The Rock, Ric Flair, Steve Austin, and as he put it, unfortunately, Hulk Hogan and Chris Jericho. So that's Mike Flynn, who's obviously not a Hogan fan, but has to begrudgingly at the end of the day go, you know what? Fucking guy's charismatic. We got to give it to him anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what I was saying before. As I've grown up, I've kind of lost my fandom for Hulk Hogan a little bit, because you realize he's not the greatest wrestler as far as in-ring work, but he can tell a story in the ring. He's just like the archetypal wrestler. He did a lot of damage with that, not only that sex tape, but just those statements.
But I got one for you here. Two guys keep going on with Hogan and Rock. That WrestleMania match, and how important it is that they're so charismatic, and what we learn now, especially in the COVID area, what they did with that crowd. You watch that match silent, not the best match in the world, but because they took the crowd on an emotional roller coaster, it's one of the big WrestleMania moments that people never forget, and that's because of how charismatic those two are, and they knew how to lead a crowd.
Yeah, and that's why, there's no denying Hogan's charisma and, his place in wrestling.
Absolutely not. And we're going to getting main event status this week to Randy Oscar from Voluntown, because you know what? We always bust this kid's chop, so he's getting main event this week. And Randy
wait. So not only does he get us to try and book Amber Nova, which we're working on, Randy. Put on your seatbelt, bud. But we're giving him main event status?
I gave him main event status this week.
All right, man. He hasn't even signed up for the Patreon, but that's fine.
We'll put some content on that Patreon for up to break, kid.
Yeah, I was gonna say we haven't put any fucking content on there, so don't anybody go like throwing their money at us yet.
Yeah, we don't want your money yet. But Randy, he gave us The Rock, Ric Flair, Chris Jericho. Here's one that's a little different: Jeff Hardy and Rowdy Piper. Now I'll say this about Jeff Hardy: out of the two Hardy brothers, back in the day, Jeff was the one that everybody pegged to be the star. Jeff was the one they put the world title on. Jeff was the one where Jim Ross had to call, "Climb the ladder, kid, make yourself famous." He was the one that looked a little different. Matt was kind of in the shadow. Now here we are years later. Matt did a lot of delete stuff and broken stuff, and I think Matt's kind of become more the two that shines personality-wise.
If you had to compare Jeff Hardy at his height creatively in whatever federation versus Matt Hardy, let's just say his height creatively is the Broken Universe, because I mean, I feel that's where he really reached a different level. Who would you give it to? Do you think the little bit of time that Matt Hardy's done the Broken thing can equal what his brother's done for like so long and being that kind of artistic output? Isn't he the charismatic enigma, if I'm not wrong?
He is, but here's the thing. At the end of the day, it's preference, it's taste, right? So for my personal taste, Jeff did have the bigger platform, extended. More people probably know. However, to me, Matt personally was better. He's a better talker of the two. And I think there's a bigger presence now with Matt. If you look at it from this standpoint too, right? Jeff got over with the machine behind him because they saw something in him. Matt went down to Impact and Ring of Honor and the Independent, and then showed up to a WWE when he went back to WrestleMania. And all these fans are chanting, "Delete, delete, delete."
True, but when he was in Impact, he did kind of build that with his brother, so it's almost... That's where it makes it tough. Who's the more creative? Because I feel like Jeff's got like that heavier artistic side, but Matt can just make it. Matt can keep it on the road easier, keep it in between the lines, so to speak.
Well, I'll tell you what. That's a tough one. That's another debate down the road. Maybe me and AJ will tackle that.
Oh God, yeah, that would be an awesome topic. I mean, we know how you feel about the Bulldog wrestling on crack, so I feel like you're already coming out for Jeff Hardy.
You know what? The kid did it. All right. Hey, let's not underestimate Matt though. Matt did some drugs back in the day. Matt, I respect you, bro. I saw some of the stuff you did. Yeah,
wasn't there like a WWE documentary where he's like falling asleep at the table?
Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of shit with Matt and Jeff. All right. However, this is not about who was the best drug addict this week. This is about who's got the most charisma. So smoke another one. All right.
Oh, God. Hey, you're calling me out, man. They can't even see the video.
Joe, I'm looking at this list, man. We got a lot of people mentioned multiple times. When I was going through reading them, were you keeping track, or were you too busy smoking up to get high?
I was not necessarily keeping track, but I mean, I could tell you just from what memory I do have, I feel like Hogan was on there a bunch of times, a lot of times unwillingly.
Yeah.
Ric Flair made a ton of lists. The Rock made a lot of lists. Dusty, I didn't even have on my list, but I should have had him on there. Superstar Billy Graham made a surprising number of lists. Was it more than 2?
Yeah, I think it was 3, but Dusty's on this list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So let's put Dusty in the next round. I mean, Ric Flair's got to go in the next round. And who do you want to split it between? Maybe a debate between Michaels and
Rock and Hogan.
Rock and Hogan, perfect.
It's gotta be. Yeah, it's gotta be. And
this is good.
Wow,
this is gonna be pretty easy.
Yeah, this normally, like we say, like we're arguing about who's gonna lose, but any of these guys can win, really.
Yeah, and especially, I think that The Rock's got to go over Hogan. If not, for, like, the way I think about it is, like, the racist statements aside, I think that the fact that Rock got into Hollywood, made arguably better movies, and was able to transition into a career like that almost has to put his charisma over the top. He came back to WrestleMania just to shoot a flamethrower off. That's a real thing.
You're kind of taking the words out of my mouth. I was going to say Hogan had the prolonged top pro wrestling career for his charismatic, but Rock was so charismatic, he basically became bigger in pro wrestling. His charisma has carried him on to that next level. So, yeah, I think Rock's got to go over Hogan. And then we got a hell of a final three here.
Yeah, and I think this might be the first time in a while that the third person in, or like the last person in, isn't the first person bounced. Because, I mean, you got Dusty, Ric Flair, and The Rock. Honestly, to me, it's between Dusty and The Rock.
Damn, Joe, you're taking the words out of my mouth. I want to argue a bit, but that's what I'm going to go with, because even though as much as I love Rick, at the end of the day, I just think there was something more charismatic about Dusty. Recently, they covered, it was Rick or Dusty, on the Jim Ross podcast, and they talked about how Jim Crockett had Dusty put Stardust on the plane, and Jim Crockett didn't stop it. And, you know, that probably didn't make Ric Flair feel too good, because at the end of the day, Jim Crockett, even though we had the title on Flair, he's basically telling you, but Dusty's our guy. He's our number one. Yep. So that's how I'm kind of like, it's really so close. I'm sure AJ might disagree, but at the end of the day, I'm going to move Dusty that final round, and it's Dusty and The Rock.
And think about, too, the fact that Dusty's charisma might have helped him as a teacher going forward, because he inspired like a whole nother generation.
He did.
And in it, like, I think part of what he taught them was charisma, or kind of how to find their character. You know, I believe I've heard Sasha Banks say it in interviews. I'm sure anybody that came through NXT felt like the brush of Dusty.
Here's the thing. I think The Rock, we said, okay, he's so charismatic. He went to that next level with the movies, right?
Yeah.
But let's look at The Rock. All right? Pretty handsome guy, all right? I'm a straight heterosexual male. Nothing wrong with that. But Rock is a handsome-looking man.
Hey, he's
the kind of guy you would put in movies. Dusty is damn sure not. Yeah. However, Dusty's so charismatic that despite his look, he had people all over him, all the fans. You can even go back to the old interviews you get. They put, like, the mic in the crowd in Florida wrestling, and girls are like, I want to see Dusty Rhodes. He's a hunk. It's like, no, he's not, kid. But I respect the fact that Dusty was able to get that far over. So to me, given his look and how charismatic he was, I'm going to go with Dusty. But, hey, man, you can make the argument. It's close.
It's tough because Jesus Christ, The Rock is half black and half Samoan. And, I mean, shit, even Nia Jax at her size is quite fetching. So that is a combination you can't deny. Yeah. But like you said, Dusty is taking he's a chubby guy. He's got a lisp, but he's got
a little bit round. My hiney's a little bit big, but I'm bad, and they know it.
Yeah, and I mean, just his charisma almost like won anybody over. So I honestly think that Dusty's got to take it this week.
Yeah, he was our best interview guy too. I remember I argued for that and fought for him to come with me, and I'm winning it. So goddamn it. The one thing you know about the Working Fans podcast, actually, Jim, I don't know if you remember this, but I'm just going to say this too. When my first idea when we were brainstorming for this, and obviously it was probably going to be plagiarism, we couldn't get away with it, I wanted to call this the Common Man podcast. So I am a fucking mark for Dusty anyway, so it is what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody that's talked to us thinks it's the Working Man's podcast. We've had more than a couple audio drops that we've either haven't used or had to somehow just like let it go because they're too big a guest. But it's all Dusty influenced, and that's something that his level of charisma will do. But Dave, you hear the music. You know what time it is, guys.
Time to get funky like a monkey, baby. We out.
All right, so that wraps us up for this week. Thank you again for listening to the Working Fans Podcast. So as always, you can find us on Twitter at FansWorking. Our Facebook page is Working Fans Wrestling Pod. We have email where you can reach out to us and let us know what you think also. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, workingfanswrestling_pod. And then as always, please continue to listen to us on Anchor.fm, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, all your major platforms. If you're following us on Apple Podcasts, which we are also on now, and YouTube, please make sure you subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. It helps us bring you these podcasts where we get to talk to you and talk with you every week.